The unsolved case of Kendrick Johnson, who was found inside a rolled-up gym mat with some of his organs missing. On January 11, 2013, a 17-year-old student at Lowndes High School was found dead inside a gym mat. Authorities concluded that Kendrick died from positional asphyxia. According to the official account, he accidentally fell into a rolled-up wrestling mat while trying to retrieve a sneaker and became trapped. Case status: ruled an accident and closed just a few months later. Kendrick's sneakers were found lodged behind his knees, not near his hands. In addition, traces of blood were reportedly found on a nearby wall and on the floor close to the scene. But the material was never subjected to DNA testing. Kendrick was about 5 feet 10 inches tall and had broad shoulders. Critics of the official explanation argued that it would have been physically unlikely for him to accidentally slip through the mat's opening, which was only about 14 inches wide. The family hired an independent pathologist who reported that Kendrick had unexplained blunt force trauma on the right side of his neck. Based on this finding, he concluded that the death was likely a homicide caused by a non-accidental blow. During the independent autopsy, it was discovered that some of Kendrick's organs were no longer in his body. In addition, the body cavity had been filled with crumpled newspaper. The funeral home stated that the organs had been discarded after deteriorating. But this explanation raised even more questions and doubts about the case. The school had 35 security cameras. When investigators reviewed the footage, they found gaps during the exact period when Kendrick entered the gym. Authorities stated that the cameras were motion activated, but experts hired by the family claimed that the footage had been altered. This remains one of the most controversial aspects of the case. Although the case has been reopened several times in 2013, 2018, and 2021, no criminal charges have ever been formally filed. The Johnson family continues to fight for what they believe would be a fair investigation. And for answers about what really happened inside that gym,
Good evening, everybody, and welcome back to the Scary Parre podcast, where we uncover true crime, cold cases, and mysteries that continue to leave more questions than answers. I'm your host, Perry T, and tonight's case is one that sparked outrage, protests, documentaries, lawsuits, conspiracy theories, and countless debates across America. This just isn't another cold case. This is the story of 17-year-old Kendrick Johnson, a high school student whose body was discovered inside a rolled up wrestling mat at his school. Authorities called it an accident. His family says it was a murder. And more than a decade later, people are still asking, what really happened to Kendrick Johnson? Now, before we begin, I want to acknowledge that this episode discusses the death of a teenager and some post mortem findings that some viewers may find upsetting. Out of respect for Kendrick and his family, I will avoid graphic descriptions while focusing on the facts, the investigation, and why this case remains so controversial. So, with that being said, I'm ready to dive in. I hope you're ready to dive in. Let's get into this episode of the Scary Parre podcast, Kendrick Johnson Uncovered. Shout out to everybody in the comments. Shout out to the TikTok family. And shout out to the audio listening viewers who were listening at a later time. So let's start with, who was Kendrick Johnson? Before Kendrick became a headline, he was simply a teenager. He lived in Valdosta, Georgia. He loved sports. He played football and basketball. Friends described him as funny, respectful, and he was always smiling. Teachers said that he was well liked. To his parents, Kenneth and Jacqueline Johnson, he was simply their baby. No one imagined that January 10th, 2013 would be the last day they'd ever see him alive. Let's talk about it. The day Kendrick disappeared on January 10th, School seemed completely normal. Students changed classes, teachers taught lessons, basketball practice was expected that afternoon. But when Kendrick didn't come home, his family knew something wasn't right. Calls were made, friends were connected. Eventually, the family reported him missing. What happened next still haunts many people today. And if you made it this far, make sure you are liking this YouTube video. Make sure you are hitting that notification bell. Make sure you are also subscribing and welcome into the Scary Parre podcast. So again, if you made it this far, make sure you like, subscribe, and welcome in. And feel free to drop any questions in the chat that you may have so that we can go over together. All right. The discovery. The next morning, sorry, I got a lot going on. I'm clicking all these buttons. My bad. The next morning, students entered the school's old gym. Inside were large road wrestling mats standing upright. One student noticed shoes sticking out from one of the mats. School officials investigated. So after that student noticed that there were shoes sticking out from one of the mats, they contacted these school officials. Principals, I assume assistant principals, contacted them. The school officials investigated what was inside the mat, and inside they found Kendrick. He was upside down inside the road wrestling mat. Authorities later believed he climbed into the mat while reaching for a shoe that had fallen inside. Because the mats were stored vertically, investigators concluded he became trapped and died from positional asphyxia. So that is where you are, in a sense, you pretty much died from hanging or from being choked out. In simple terms, they believed that he couldn't free himself. That explanation will become one of the most debated conclusions in this modern true crime. So let's dive into some of the questions that happened almost immediately after this investigation sparked. Okay. So the first questions people began asking was, how could a healthy athlete become trapped? Why wasn't he heard yelling? Were there cameras nearby? Were students in the gym? Why did no one notice? Those questions spread across social media faster than investigators could answer them, and that was only the beginning. The surveillance video surrounding the gym that police reviewed showed Kendrick walking through parts of the campus. However, some cameras weren't recording continuously. Instead, certain systems captured frames at intervals, and too many viewers unfamiliar with how older surveillance system worked, the footage appeared choppy. So to the natural eye, when they started to release some of this footage, and of course, I don't know if you guys remember when this case broke, but I do. Us at the time, Facebook investigators, before we became TikTok investigators, Facebook investigators, we went to work. We were trying to figure out what happened to this boy. We were trying to figure that out, right? And we were trying to figure out why their surveillance was, it's like you would see him here at one point in the school. So let's just say, for example, you would see him walking through the cafeteria. According to the school's outline and map, the cafeteria is here, the gym is like down the way and around the corner. So you would see him walking through the cafeteria, going out into the hallway, cut out, and then you see him entering the gym. So we were just confused as to how. So online speculation quickly followed that there was some foul play. And some people believed that the footage had been edited. Hey, my YouTube commenters. Thank y'all for tapping in. Again, make sure y'all interact with me. If y'all have any questions or anything like that, interact. Some people believe that the footage had been edited, and investigators maintain that there was no evidence that surveillance had been intentionally altered. Even today, discussions about the video continue online. Now, let's get into the missing shoe theory. Before we get into the missing shoe theory, I would like to show you guys a picture. And if you're on the TikTok side, you might want to head over to the YouTube side so that you can be a part of these graphics. I would like to show you this picture. If you are one who is uncomfortable with forensic graphics and things like that, this will be the time I recommend you probably head out of the live and count to 30 and then come back. All right, ready? Here we go. Oh, 1 second. So this is the condition of which they found Kendrick. You guys see his shoes, both, it looks like both pair of shoes are in there with him, and all this picture depicts is his legs and his feet. This is the condition of which they found him. Wow. This just kind of is one of those things where it's just like, wow. And then I can only sympathize with the parents of having to see this and wow, you know. So investigators believed Kendrick normally kept his gym shoes inside the road wrestling mats. Students reportedly did this to avoid paying for lockers. Police theorized one shoe slipped towards the center of the mat, and Kendrick supposedly reached inside head first, and gravity did the rest. So, my question is, if the mats are hanging up, right? They're hanging up vertically. And his shoe, how does his shoe fall into the mat to the point where, I guess what I'm trying to say is, how is he getting up at that point? You guys get what I'm trying to say? Like, how is he getting where if the mat is hanging vertically, how is he getting up there to where the shoe is dropped in there? That's my first question. And then not only that, there's if they're saying gravity did the rest, well, if gravity pulled that much weight of a man down, why couldn't gravity pull down the rest of the shoe through the mat? You get what I'm saying? Are you seeing what I'm saying? Are you picking up what I'm putting down? Because that's one of the questions that I would be asking. So with that, and so what they're saying is that Kendrick supposedly reached inside of the mat head first, and then gravity did the rest without enough space for him to brace himself. Okay, so let me pull this picture back up. And I'm sorry that I have to pull this picture back up. In this picture, it looks like he is stuck, right? And if they are saying that if they are saying that his cause of death was like a accidental asphyxiation, he couldn't get himself out without enough space to brace himself, how did he get stuck? That's my whole thing. How did he, if gravity did the rest and supposedly was pulling him down, it's not making sense to me. He allegedly became trapped. Supporters of the accident theory say this explains everything. Critics, like Perry T here, says it explains almost nothing. This theory got me nowhere. When I was studying this case, this theory absolutely got me nowhere. Here are some of the family's beliefs. So from day one, Kendrick's parents rejected the accidental death ruling. They believed someone attacked their son. Over the years, they have consistently called for additional investigations and accountability. Their fight has become almost as well known as the case itself. No matter where people stand, few can deny the determination his parents have shown. So ultimately, his parents are like us TikTok investigators. Sorry, I had to sit back a little bit. His parents are like us TikTok investigators and us Facebook investigators at the time of this case. His parents are like and just like Dan said here in the comments on YouTube, the math ain't mathing. The facts aren't faxing. Like we're getting a Dow tone because the facts aren't faxing. Like let's make this make sense. and it's not making sense. And I think that's why this case has such a heavy impact on the on the internet investigators, because it never made sense. It never made sense as to how this young man was found in that predicament. And the first thing they're saying is his shoe fell in a vertical wrestling mat that was hanging up. So how did his shoe get up there to where it could fall down? And then if it was just that little bit of space there in between the like opening for him, how could he even get that far into the mattress to begin with? The shoe couldn't even fall all the way through. So how could he even get in there? You see what I'm saying? So let's go ahead and let's talk about the autopsy. One of the biggest points of controversy involved the medical examinations. An official autopsy ruled the death accidental. Later, the family, I'm getting attacked by a gnat, Jesus. Later, the family sought independent examinations. Those independent experts raised questions and offered differing opinions about aspects of Kendrick's injuries. These conflicting conclusions fueled even more public debate. It's important to remember that different medical experts can interpret findings differently. Those disagreements do not automatically prove a homicide or an accident. They simply demonstrate why this case remains heavily debated. So I want to make that clear. However, even though I wanted to bring that point up, I also wanted us to take something into account. The family had multiple experts come and do the autopsy. They had multiple experts. Their experts and their findings all aligned. They were all different than the original autopsy. That's where a lot of the conflicting conclusions came from. Okay. Are we all on the same page? Everybody still good? Everybody still good? We're still here? Thumbs up. So let's talk about the organ issue. Okay. Perhaps one of the most emotional moments came when Kendrick's body was exhumed. During that process, the family learned his internal organs had not been preserved inside the body after the autopsy. Instead, the body had been filled with newspaper before burial. While this practice, though uncommon to the public, can occur after organs are retained for forensic examination and not returned, the discovery deeply shocked Kendrick's family and became another source of public outrage. For many people, it became symbolic of how they believed the case had been mishandled. So, I want to get you guys' thoughts on this. As someone or a person that has a loved one, unfortunately, they pass. You go view their body and you find out that their organs have already been taken at the autopsy. And according to other reports, allegedly he was found without his organs to begin with, without some of his organs to begin with. Crazy, right? What is your next move? What are you to do? How are you to feel? And then as a parent, for me, well, I'm not a parent, but if I was his parent, I would feel like my child's opportunity, like let's say we wanted to donate his organs to someone to keep his like legacy or his memory or something of him alive. Let's say we wanted to do that. We were robbed of that. That's crazy. We were robbed of that opportunity. So it's so crazy to hear that even before they even get to where they are doing the embalming and all that, his organs were already gone and his body was already stuffed with newspaper. And then you mean to tell me if the person who does the autopsy removed the organs to test the organs, they couldn't test to see if there was some type of like, or did a toxicology report to see if there was something in his system? Maybe he was drugged, maybe he was something to knock him out? They didn't do that? Hmm. All right. Let's tap into the FBI investigation. So, because of public pressure, federal authorities eventually reviewed the case. So, because us TikTok investigators got into this and we start putting the pressure, and then the family also was putting in pressure. I'm going to make those comments bigger, y'all, so I can see them. That's such an invasion of privacy and such. You wouldn't trust anyone as his parent. Exactly. Yes. Because of public pressure, federal authorities eventually reviewed the case. Investigators examined evidence and interviewed witnesses. Ultimately, till this day, no federal criminal charges were filed. The official finding remained that there was insufficient evidence to support a homicide prosecution. For Kendrick's family, that was devastating. This case exploded online. Some theories suggested that he was being bullied. Others suggested that maybe a fight happened and it got out of hand. Others accused some classmates, and others believed there had been a larger cover up involving influential families. It's important to separate speculation from verified evidence. To date, none of the major conspiracy theories have been proven in courts or officially confirmed by investigators. But that didn't stop people from asking questions. But it does remind us to be careful not to present internet theories as established facts. So I say that to say any theory that is here and that you hear on the Scary Parre podcast, it is just that. It is a theory, it is a conspiracy, it is not Bible, it is not an actual factual, it is just my thoughts and opinions. Now, I want to step away from the investigation for a moment because this case speaks to a much bigger issue: trust in institutions. When families lose trust in investigators, every unanswered question becomes larger. When families begin not to trust the person that is leading the case, all their unanswered questions become one of those things where it's like bigger than what the original question was supposed to be. Transparency matters. Whether the official conclusion is accepted or not, people deserve to understand how those conclusions were reached. So they concluded that he died of an accidental asphyxia when he somehow got into that wrestling mat. They concluded that, but they didn't answer the questions that followed after that. How did he get in there? Why did you get to that conclusion? Is that conclusion an okay conclusion, or did you just say, I don't want to work this case, let's go with this? So there's that. Also, the power and the danger of social media. Social media kept Kendrick's name alive. Without it, many people might never have heard of his story. But social media can, again, like we know, also spread misinformation just as quickly as facts. As consumers of true crime, we have a responsibility to question sources and verify information and avoid turning real people into entertainment. At the end of the day, every victim deserves dignity, and sometimes true crime becomes about theories instead of the person. Kendrick wasn't just a case file. He was someone's son, someone's friend, someone's teammate. His humanity should always come before the mystery. And our communities demand accountability. So whether someone believes Kendrick's death was an accident or believes there was foul play, one thing many people can agree on is communities want thorough investigations. People want confidence that every victim receives the same level of attention, transparency, and care. That expectation isn't about a single case. It's about trust in the justice system as a whole. People want confidence that every victim receives the same level of attention, the same level of transparency, and care. I cannot repeat that again. So here is where the case stands today. More than 13 years later, the official manner of death still remains accidental. No one has been criminally charged in connection with Kendrick Johnson's death. His family continues to seek answers and has remained vocal in advocating for further review. For many people, the case remains emotionally unsolved. For me, personally, this case touched me personally. I did not know Kendrick Johnson. However, I always have that sympathetic and that empathetic ear towards the victims and their family, because Kendrick Johnson could have been my brother. You know, he could have been my brother. He could have been a cousin. He could have been an uncle. I always have that sympathetic ear to him. And the fact that, unfortunately, we don't know exactly what happened. We have the public has lots of questions. The cameras in the building don't even give us a story that makes sense. The cameras don't even give us a timeline. Speaking of timeline, if you guys want to look at this here, I'm gonna move the comments for a little bit. Let me see. Can I make them smaller? I'm gonna just take them off the screen for a second. So if you guys would like to screenshot this and review this at a later time for you, you definitely can. This is the timeline of events that happened from the time that he went missing up until present, where we still don't have, the family still doesn't have um any resolvedness with this case. They don't have any answers as far as what could possibly happen, other than the fact that it was an accidental death. So if you guys would like to take a screenshot of this, you definitely can. And to my TikTok viewers, if you would like this, you can DM me and I can send it to you separately, or I can send it to you to your DM. So let's go ahead and let's wrap this up here. Cases like this remind us why true crime is so compelling. Sometimes the mystery isn't only what happened. It's why so many people continue to disagree about the answer. Got to put those comments back there. Whether you believe this was a tragic accident or you believe important questions remain unanswered, one thing is certain: Kendrick Johnson's story continues to resonate with people across the country. If there is one lesson we can take away, it's this: never stop asking thoughtful questions, but never lose sight of humanity behind the headlines. If you found this episode informative, be sure to like, subscribe, and share this Scary Parre episode with someone who loves respectful, fact-based true crime. And I want to hear from you. Do you believe Kendrick Johnson's death was a tragic accident, or do you think there are still unanswered questions that deserve further investigation? Leave your thoughts in the comments, but remember to keep the discussion respectful. This case involves a real family that continues to grieve. Until next time, stay aware, stay curious, and remember, sometimes the scariest stories are the ones that still don't have answers. Before I head out of here, I'm going to read Dan's comment. Perry, yes. So if you go back to on the Scary Parre podcast page on this page, go back a couple episodes. I did the Shaquilla Robinson's case, and I did a two-part series on the Kanika Jenkins case. So go back and tap into those and watch those. Now, again, my name is Perry. I'm your girl, Perry T. This has been the Scary Parre podcast. Make sure you like, comment, subscribe, hit that notification bell so you get notified when I go live the next time. Thanks for tuning in. And with that, goodbye.